Cool. Hey everyone, it's Barb Egan, and on today's live, I am so excited to talk about 3 tips to managing anxiety. And we're going to give a little bonus one because I like to use a technique called the STOP technique. So STOP. So they're going to be 4, 3 plus 1, a bonus one. But anxiety is my specialty. That's the number one thing that I work in as a therapist. I mean, we see a little bit of everything, to be honest. There's no purist out there of this type of modality of cognitive behavioral therapy, narrative therapy, EMDR therapy, solution focus, all these sorts of different types of therapies, or presenting issues, quote unquote, depression, anxiety, trauma, couples. We work in a little bit of everything, most of us, at least that's what I do. But anxiety, I would say, is my specialty because it's the most frequent thing I work in. And it's part of my story. I know it so, so well. I experience it still to this day. And I think as humans, we all do. And I think our culture has anxiety about anxiety because it gets so tossed around or trendy, or, every student or teen has anxiety and can't take a test. That's what teachers tell me a lot when I go in and speak at schools or universities. And so I want to give you some tips. Again, I'm all about the practical, all about the evidence-based research, but all about the practical, like how can it actually fit into your real life? So I love hearing from all of you, and welcome. We've got a hello from Kelowna, BC. That's where I'm at, in British Columbia on the west coast of Canada. A hello from Wisconsin, from Michelle, which is awesome because I grew up in Wisconsin. I grew up moving, actually. She said she was born in Pennsylvania, which is literally where I was born. I was born outside of Scranton, the home of The Office. Like it is. And actually a few years ago, it was rated the most unhappy place in America. It's an old coal mining area that kind of really down and out economically. And so we moved out from there. I moved almost every year growing up. So I lived in Wisconsin. Madison, Wisconsin's probably my favorite place I've ever lived because I played hockey there and I just love the culture. It's so awesome. And then I moved to Ohio and all sorts of places. I played hockey at Ohio State. Before that, I lived in Minnesota, Shattuck St. Mary's. I'm going to give a shout out because last night was the Stanley Cup Finals and Championship. So the Colorado Avalanche won. And 2 guys that went to my school, you might have heard of them, Nathan McKinnon and Jack Johnson. They won Stanley Cup last night, which is so awesome. So, that's awesome. But I want to preface that because all of those things, the moving, I moved almost every year. From East Coast to Midwest, all around the Midwest, often for hockey, like I mentioned too. So moving every year, being the new girl in middle school, never fun. High performance athlete. Like I went to a school, again, where like Nathan McKinnon, Sidney Crosby, Jonathan Toews, all these NHL captains and superstars went. It was high performance. So the flip side of often these high performers is anxiety, which again is why I love working in it, whether it's your business CEO, whether you're a professional athlete, whether you're a stay-at-home mom, a university student, a high school student. As humans, we just all experience it. And so I want to encourage you today that we're going to get some tips, but regardless, if you take home one thing, don't let yourself be labeled by that, because we can experience anxiety. It's a common human experience. We can experience anxiety, but we don't have to be defined by it. And that's a big difference. I think it's easy to kind of get settled or labeled into a box. And I just want to encourage you, we're going to get some tools to get out of that box, and that experience of anxiety actually isn't all bad either. Like a little bit of stress and anxiety is really good, because it can force you to want to study for that test or prepare for that interview because you have some nerves in it. It means you have some skin in the game. And I think the silver lining there is that you care. It can make you look at your schedule and say, wow, I'm really overwhelmed, but all I have to enact some time management skills and put in certain places so I can get this to-do list done if it's in a realistic manner. That is actually empowering versus overwhelming. So I do want to preface it. Anxiety is not all bad. Our goal is not to get rid of anxiety completely or stress completely, because we do have this like optimal range, every single one of us, of a stress zone that actually makes us focus, work hard, be motivated, be inspired, kind of go, go, go. So we don't want to get rid of that completely, but it's a fine line of if we get out of that window. And we kind of use that term window of tolerance. It's kind of like you jump out the window. That's not a good thing. You're too overwhelmed, but we do want to get in a sweet spot. And that sweet spot is really personal to you. So I want to open that up to you all of what are things that you're already doing to cope with anxiety or to manage anxiety. And again, I use those words cope and manage very strategically, because their goal is not to get rid of anxiety completely. We can stop it. We can overcome it. We can be over above it versus underneath and overwhelmed by it. Absolutely. But what are some anxiety strategies that you're doing already? And we did this with our depression live last time, and I loved it because honestly, that was my favorite part of just hearing from you all. Like there's from Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, British Columbia, Canberra, Australia. Another person, I moved every year as well. Hello from Illinois. Okay, I lived in Illinois too. I lived in Springfield, Illinois, the capital, home of Abraham Lincoln, outside of Chicago. So this is awesome to see people literally from all over the world. And what's a commonality, even if we live in different places in different countries, if we're in different seasons of life? Anxiety. It's a common human experience. And some things that we do to cope with it, or some strategies that we use when we're feeling anxious. A walk. Oh, I like it. Yeah, very much. Getting outside. Yes, a walk can be so great. And I'll kind of give you a little science behind it, because you hear take a breath, take some deep breaths, go for a walk, get outside. And why it's so important is actually just that rhythmic movement of your mind and your body. Help your mind and your body connect, of your nervous system. It helps you regulate, just the stepping motion, being outside. Because in our culture, we're so often just go, 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 or autopilot, or doing a few tasks at once. And when we get spread thin, we can actually experience anxiety. So sometimes it's not, oh, I don't know why I'm anxious. It's, okay, what am I doing that's making me feel this way? Am I doing multiple things at once? Am I juggling a couple balls at once, so to speak? And when we're in a walk, I usually encourage people to say, and I do a lot of walk and talk therapy, or I just encourage people to use that as a strategy too, of taking the sights and the sounds, like really look at a leaf or a tree, like really the detail of the tree bark, smell the flowers. Like this is where you want to stop and smell the flowers. We want to really see it. We want to touch it. We want to smell it. We want to use our senses, because our senses help ground us and really limit or decrease our anxiety. So that's great. Yeah. Erin says, unfortunately, often using food to deal with anxiety. Totally. And there's sometimes when I go into organizations, I speak a lot on anxiety. It's my favorite thing to speak about, again, because it's a common human experience. And I often do a lunch and learn type style around mindfulness and anxiety. And so, what that often looks like is taking food, because that's a big thing. Either people have upset stomachs, they don't want to eat, that's a really common symptom, or they go to kind of the eating and it's mindless. And so what we do is, if they have a water or a coffee or a tea, I get them to really hold their glass and feel it, or their food, and really feel it, smell it, really savor and taste it. And again, similar to the walk, we're using our senses, as many senses as we can, to help calm that nervous system. So even if you find yourself, I think one that's really insightful that you're able to say, oh, when I'm feeling anxious, I go to this. Let's say it's food, and I'm just snacking, or I'm trying to make myself feel better. That's a common one. And so I would encourage you to even make some lists, or what we talk about today, or whatever anyone else says, make a list, put them in your phone or your journal, take a picture so it's nice and handy, and try to challenge yourself to say, I have to try everything on this list, or 3 things on this list, before I just grab the chips or the ice cream or whatever. And sometimes just interrupting that cycle, we're going to see that here in a little bit, is all that you need. And one, I just think it's really brave of you to share, hey, here's something that I do when I'm feeling anxious and I don't really like it. I think there's a lot of power in that. The first step is really to identify it. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Nilda says music. There's some art. Ooh, aromatherapy, snuggles, sweets. Yeah, that's awesome. So often with music, I encourage people, and we talked about this last time too, but there's something about the melody in the lyrics that often can tap into a place of us emotionally that sometimes cognitively we can't get, words just fail. So whether it's, and everybody's a little different here. I'm going to use this as an exercise example because that's my background, but some people really like, mindfulness. I see another one, breathing. This could be yoga and light stretching. This can be kind of on one spectrum of being really gentle stretching, really good deep breathing. I think there's a really good place for that to help calm anxiety. The other side of the spectrum, some people, that actually doesn't really help get that extra pent up energy, which is just anxiety. It's extra pent up energy in the body out. It's just not enough. So some people that I work with find it really helpful to connect with music, and on that chorus of a song that really resonates emotionally with them, speed up. So they incorporate not just exercise or a walk, but high intensity training. And so they're heavy lifting or sprinting or increasing their speed or something like that in that chorus time, or at least intermittently. And it helps them release some of that extra pent up energy that's stored in the body and the muscles. So again, you talk with your physician. Every body is different too, but try those. Those could be good things. That's awesome. And I'm a big fan of aromatherapy and just smelling things, again, senses, lavender, art, creating. On one of our podcasts, we had an art therapist on that I got to interview, and it was so fascinating because in graduate school, we really don't get to work in this area a lot. Even in private practice, we don't get to get really trained. You have to have specialized training in this, but art is a human experience too. I mean, we all create, we're designed to create, and that can be refurbishing furniture. It could be painting. It could be different mediums. And she talked about that a lot, of using paints or crayons or markers and different mediums like that to create art, to express that, which is really neat. So that's great. Plants. I'm all about plants. Love my greenery. Plus it's just literally very healthy too. Oh, some dancing. Oh yes. Get it out, move your body, actually recalibrate, regulate your body can be really huge. That's beautiful. These are great. And the breathing and anxiety and breathing are really common. If you think of it kind of like a puzzle piece, oh, I'm feeling really stressed and anxious. Oftentimes you think, okay, I got to breathe, because one of those symptoms of anxiety is short and shallow breaths. So if we even feel comfortable to practice right now, I'm starting to get just uncomfortable doing that. And I'm not particularly anxious right now. But when I breathe that way, it can kind of signal to my brain, ooh, there could be an imminent threat of something to be scared about, fight, flight, or freeze, get ready to get activated. And then already your anxiety system can be coming on just by the breathing. So if you can connect with your breath, and sometimes I like to do a pressure point just right here on my chest. And let's do it again. Just a big inhale. And then exhale out of your mouth. And again, I love the evidence base. I love the research. I love the practicality, but breathing can be huge. And so one of those techniques that we're going to look at in the stop technique involves breathing. So the very first one, often when we're experiencing anxiety, is S. And I'll pull up the diagram right now, but S stands for stop. Stop what you're doing. You can even say stop out loud because it can kind of interrupt that thought pattern that perpetuates anxiety. And so oftentimes it's like a bike wheel. And I often think about, because I'm an Adam Sandler fan, the scene in Big Daddy where, there's the rollerbladers and bikers and things like that. And think of a bike wheel going like this. And Adam Sandler and the little boy, they throw the stick and they trip over it. Like the biker and the rollerblader. So think of it like that. If we can interrupt that cycle of going, that could be our negative thought that's perpetuating anxiety. And before we know it, then we're feeling anxious. And then our behavior goes to mindless eating, or we eat to cope. So let's throw a stick in that spoke, in that wheel. So boom, right in the middle of that wheel, we stop it. That's the first step, is just to stop it. So how do we do that practically? Is sometimes we have to say it out loud. Sometimes we have to write it out. Stop. Sometimes then it's T, take a break, or take a breath. So it could be literally stopping whatever you're doing. Like maybe you are around someone that's causing you to feel anxiety. And if you can, just to stop, like, and then take a break. T, take a break, like remove yourself from that person, or take a breath. And so what that can look like is maybe you're in a position where you can put your hand on your chest, and you can close your eyes if you want to, or keep them open. And you can take some really big deep breaths for a few minutes, like just or you can count to 4 and inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold it. And now exhale for 4, 3, 2, 1. So you can do some counted breathing. You can envision like a flower. So on your inhale, that you're smelling the flower. So inhale and smell the flower. And exhale, blowing all the petals, letting things go. So you can do just a regular, good old, big old fashioned, big breath in and out, and do that for a few times. You can do counted breathing if you want something more rigid or structured, if that helps you focus on something. Or if you like something a little bit more creative, but also focused, envision maybe a flower, inhaling that flower, and then exhaling those different petals. Now that's great if you're by yourself and you feel comfortable to do that. But let's say you're in a meeting, or you're at work, or you're around someone and you're feeling anxious, but you can't escape. Because again, with anxiety, we often want to escape. We want to fight it, we want to flight it, and we want to freeze. And so let's say you can't. You're there, you're in that meeting. Well, just take a few deep breaths. You don't have to close your eyes. You don't have to put your hand on your chest. You can take just a few deep breaths. You can excuse yourself and go get a coffee or tea, or go to the bathroom. Like say you're having a coffee break or a bathroom break, and you can go to the bathroom by yourself and just really focus and calm down. But regardless, you can take a breath pretty much anywhere. whether you're driving, on a bus, in a meeting, around certain people where you can't really get away from. And it's amazing what a breath does. So again, what happens in our brain is there's a right side and a left side of our brain. And you might have heard about that. One I call is kind of like the Nike brain, the just do it, the in the moment, the here and now. The other side of our brain is more logical, analytical, rational. Like we can think about what we're thinking about, and we could be rational. Like, oh no, there's no reason to get upset about this. Or just because I said this doesn't mean I'm going to get fired, or worst case scenario. But sometimes our logical brain doesn't talk to our in the moment brain. And so our, thoughts can be really catastrophic, worst case scenario, what if worries. And if you're like me, you might have had them even in the last week. And so if you can start to identify that, that's huge. And what breathing does is if we went right to that to say, oh, don't think that way, that doesn't help, just snap out of it. It's not that big of a deal. Oh, it probably won't happen. Some of us can go right to our brain, like our upstairs brain, where we can think rationally, but sometimes we can't. And I like to describe it kind of like the bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. So it's connecting two pieces. Let's say right side of your brain and left side of your brain, logical side and in the moment side. And when it's too flooded with an intense emotion or distress, you experience a lot of anxiety. And even physically in your brain, in your body, not just in your brain, your thoughts are spinning like those wheels. Your body is responding, the short and shallow breaths, the pit in your stomach, you're getting hot and sweaty, like your fight or flight's coming on. And so what happens then is you get flooded. So think about that Golden Gate Bridge. You can't cross it. It's flooded. The water got too high. It's too flooded emotionally. And that's what happens is we can try and rationalize or, oh, the worst case scenario is not going to happen. Like just think straight here. Well, you're not going crazy, even though it feels that way. You're just flooded. That's the word, flooded. And so breathing can help you calm down in a few minutes versus a few hours of just, if you didn't do it, it might take your body and your brain some time. And it could be minutes, it could be 20, 30 minutes, it could be 3 to 4 hours, or breathing helps it calm down. So that's the power of a breath. And I usually like this kind of mantra of connect with your breath. Connect with your breath, because that little saying, connect with your breath, actually gives our brain and our body something to connect with. Think of it being connected then, because then it's connecting the bridge too. So S, stop. Stop what you're doing. Maybe you have to say stop aloud. Maybe you need to remove yourself. T, take a break or take a breath. O, observe. So often with anxiety, like I mentioned, we go to the what ifs. So let's go to the what is. So what is, and this is kind of like if you were living a reality TV show and people were watching you and they were just able to see the who, the what are you doing? The where are you? The when is it? Like all the facts, because with anxiety, it often goes to feeling or, instead of facts. So facts over feeling is a good kind of premise here. And thoughts are just thoughts. They're not necessarily true. And so go down and write all these things out. Observe, like kind of be a scientist here. The who, the what, where, when, who were you with? What were you doing? Write down specifically. When was it? Like the day and time, like 4:30 p.m. on June 27th, things like that. And so we just want to make it as fact-based as possible. So the what is versus the what ifs. Now with that observe too, we can also say where in our body are we feeling it? Because often our body tries to tell us something is up before our thoughts clue in. So in our body, it could be, oh, I'm feeling it in my chest. It's pounding or really, really tight. Oh, I feel it in my stomach. It's in knots. I feel it in my palms. They're really sweaty. I'm really hot. I feel it in my cheeks. I'm really hot. I would describe it as red. So there, again, you're observing where in your body do you feel it? I like to call this name it to tame it too. If we can name it, then we can start to tame it. And that goes with our body. Where do I feel it in my body? or our behaviors, like, oh, I'm eating again. Am I feeling anxious? And it could be a behavior, or it could be a thought. It could be, oh, I'll never get this job. Oh, everybody else has it so much better than I do. Oh no, the worst case scenario of X is going to happen. So again, I like to write these out all in that observe kind of column or on a piece of paper, because anytime we get it out of up here in our head onto a piece of paper, we shift up perspective, which is the last thing, perspective and practice. And that's really the goal, is what would a friend say to me? Or what would I say to a friend? And think about specific friends here, like not just in general, but we want to make it as specific as possible. Maybe it's your mom. Maybe it's your best friend, Kelly. Maybe it's your spouse. Maybe it's your child, what you would say to them. And I bet you would say something a little bit different, a little bit kinder to them, or they would say it to you than maybe how you're thinking in yourself with the big definitive, never, everybody, always type words. So we can practice what works here too, along with that perspective shift, because if it's a walk, then now's the time to go for a walk. That's interrupting that cycle too. Maybe it's exercise, maybe it's art, maybe it is calling a friend. But there's practice, there's perspective, there's personal. Everybody deals with this differently. And that's why I love hearing from you all. And I'll open it up here in a second to even have you comment and interact more. But it's so personal. So again, like I gave even the exercise example, some people will really like the stretching, the yoga, really, really calm. And some people will say that I can't sit in that. I need to get it out. I need to go for a hard run or something along those lines. And so we're all different. And that's why I think counseling and working with someone or having that accountability person that you can talk to, just talk through these things to practice with, to say, okay, I've tried this. It didn't really work for me, or I tried this and I felt really good to do that. Maybe it's journaling. Journaling's a really big one too. I mean, our journals are great at Switch Research, but we have a lot of other great resources. There's so many good ones out there too. If, just a blank piece of paper is hard for you, maybe you just start with STOP, like stop what I'm doing, take a breath, observe. That's where you write down maybe a little bit more of identifying your thoughts. What are you thinking about? Where in your body do you feel it? And then that P, what would I say to a friend, specific friend, think of them, or what they would say to you, and write those down. And it's not going to feel natural at first. And this is kind of the hiccup, because people often say, well, I tried that one time, it didn't work. Well, if you tried riding a bike when you're, 4 or 5 years old one time and it didn't work and you just stopped, you'd never get to experience the joy of riding bikes and riding bikes with friends and going for bike rides, even as adults. And so I want to encourage you, it is like riding a bike. The more that you practice it, the better you'll get at it, the more natural you'll get at it too. Think back to the very first time of trying something new, whether it was riding a bike or learning math or a new skill or a new recipe. The more that you do it, the more natural it becomes too. And that can be really hard, because we do live in a culture where we really do want to just, move to the next thing or get it right away. And we're not going to be experts, and that's okay. It's really helpful to just continue to practice this. And I think here we get to practice that, and that mindfulness, which a lot is of the grounding, the senses, can be really big. And one of the mindfulness tips that you can do is literally what we talked about around eating or drinking, of just holding that cup, really smelling it, tasting it, because we eat every day. And we did a whole mindfulness series too, or a YouTube live, and you're welcome to go back and look at that. But that's really the premise of it, to help, again, the flooding of the brain calm down, so your logical side and your here and now side can communicate. So I'm going to pause here, or take a stop here. Does anyone have any questions or comments on that stop technique? Is there anything that you may have questions about or that really resonated with you? It could be around what kind of breathing you like to do, what you like to do to actually help you stop, interrupt those cycles. Maybe it's a change of scenery, like a change of physical scenery can help change our mental scenery. So that could be like cleaning up dishes or cleaning up one area of a room to help calm that anxiety. It could be actually taking a trip somewhere, even just a little drive, like a physical change of scenery or a walk can help change that mental scenery. Let's see. Oh, Nilda, I don't know if I'm understanding this. I saw it earlier and I didn't really understand. When teaching, it is not possible to leave your students alone, what then? Oh, so you're a teacher, you're feeling some anxiety, you can't leave your students alone. So again, taking some deep breaths in that moment, like get through whatever you have to get through. And this is true for anybody. Like if you can't leave a meeting or a classroom or a game, try to get through the next 1 minute and then keep adding to that. Get through that next song, the next TV show, the next lesson that you're trying to teach. Again, maybe it's that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 grounding exercise that we talked about in mindfulness too, of naming 5 things that you see, even just in your head to yourself of, oh, I see 5 blue things even. And you can do an abbreviated version depending on how much time you have, but 5 blue things I see. What's something I feel? Oh, I have my water and my coffee. I'm just going to take a sip. And that's where you can practice that mindfulness part so that you can just really try to get through what you're getting through. And then I think the big key here too is not just to escape and watch Netflix at night. This is what a lot of us do and not really address it, but we need to reflect on it. Okay, what was going on today? Again, this is where you can practice that stop technique later on at night. We're observing, okay, leading up, what made me anxious? Was I disrespected? Was a student challenging my authority? Did I not feel competent in what I was doing or teaching? Or was it there's just too much noise and chaos? Write about it. And we need to get we need to observe it, but we need to get another perspective on, okay, what can I control here? What can I implement next time? So in the moment, even if you can't leave students, take some deep breaths, practice that mindfulness with your water or a snack, or just looking around the room, even to yourself, of naming some things in that room to help calm you down. And then at the end of the day, when you're feeling more in a safe place, in a calm down state, reflect on what was going on, because we want to catch that trigger so it doesn't happen again. Okay. Celeste, what does observe do? So observe really brings facts in, because oftentimes anxiety, we just go based on feelings. I'm feeling anxious, therefore there must be danger. I feel like it's going to be the worst case scenario, therefore it's going to happen. Where that's just a feeling, it's not fact. When we observe and say, okay, here are the facts, here's what's actually going on, we get a different perspective. We actually get above it. It's kind of like a helicopter view. You're getting that 30,000 feet view from above versus, and there's a lot more perspective in that versus feeling underneath and overwhelmed by it. So when we can observe, we can see some patterns or maybe some triggers too of, oh, I was doing too much at once. Or again, maybe it was just a lot of people talking at once, or loud noises, a lot of stimulus, but just observing of, oh, I didn't sleep that well, or I was hungry, or, oh, they said that and it triggered something, some insecurity in me that made me feel overwhelmed. But that's what observation does. And when we write it out, oftentimes we just free up mental real estate in our brain that we can think more clearly and see things that maybe we didn't think or see in the moment. Becky, this is a helpful model. Good sharing on managing anxiety. Thank you. Thanks. And this is a lot of practice. Like, it sounds pretty easy, stop, but it's a lot of practice. And I would encourage you, practice with small things. So if you know you're going into a classroom setting or a meeting where you can't really get out, your anxiety is already heightened because you're feeling a little trapped. Practice in things that you're not feeling that anxious about, that it's like a 3 out of 10. And that can be a good practice too, is just rating it out of 10. Like, okay, 10 out of 10 anxiety is the worst I've ever felt. 0 is really almost none. Where am I at? And sometimes we think of anxiety like I either have it or I don't, like an on or off switch on a lamp, but think of it more like a dimmer or more like a staircase, and we got to come down. So maybe at first in that classroom setting, I was a 7 out of 10 and I could feel it all over my body. And I tried, naming 3 red things in my classroom to calm down and taking some deep breaths. And that just got me to a 6. And 6 is a little bit better than a 7. But I then reminded myself, okay, tonight I'm going to have, some tea. I'm going to light a favorite candle. I'm going to have a bubble bath. I'm going to call a friend, or I'm just going to take some time to journal and think through what was going on in my day. I'm going to be able to process. And then from there, that kind of calmed you down even a little bit more. So you went from a 7 to a 6 to a 5 to now a 4. And that can be really more likely to happen of a staircase rather than an on or off switch. Amit says, sometimes I have to actually talk out loud to myself and tell myself to stop and take a second. And I often encourage people, say your name out loud, like, Barb, stop. And what happens is you're kind of like, oh, did someone just say something to me? Your brain kind of does a double take, and that can be enough to interrupt that spoke wheel or that thought pattern. So that's awesome. And sometimes, you know what, if you're on a walk and you have your headphones on and cars are going by or people go by, like, just talk out loud to yourself because they think you're on a phone call. It's totally fine. Or in the shower in your car or something. Lena, I'm new to this and this is helping me. Thank you. Yes. And there's so many things on anxiety, but I like something because in the moment, what happens, we often get flooded. Again, that San Francisco Golden Gate Bridge, we get flooded. We can't think straight. You're not going crazy. It's just how anxiety works. And so we need something tangible to grab onto. So if it's one thing of just count to 4 and inhale and then exhale for 4, great. If it's stop, of literally stop what you're doing, take a deep breath, observe, like just even name it in your brain. If you can't write something down of, okay, this is what's going on. And then proceed into practicing, something that works, or it could be a perspective shift or a person. What would they say to me? What would I say to them? It could be mindfulness here of just taking a sip of water and really feeling that cup, smelling it, those sort of things. So I would write it down, keep it in, even this diagram, like in the notes section of your phone or in your photos, so you can handle, go back to it quite easily, because it's like a new skill, like riding a bike. It's going to be a little awkward at first or unnatural, but the more times you do it, you're absolutely going to find something that works for you, because it's really personal too. Let's see, coffee. Yes. And so I love coffee. Some people find when they have too much caffeine, it's like a fine line to spike their anxiety or not. So pay attention to your body. Everybody's unique. And so pay attention to that. I love my iced coffees in the summer. So that's really awesome. I love it. Erin, I love your challenge that we have to reflect and not just zone out. I will practice making lists of possible practices and trying at least before grabbing food. It's so true, because how many of us, we experience something anxiety provoking during the day. And most of us, when we experience anxiety, what do we want to do? We want to flight. We want to run away from it. We don't want anything to do with it, but we have to gently face that fear. And so typically what we do is, okay, I don't want to think about it. I'm done with work. That happened. Now I need a break. I deserve a break. I just want to zone out and watch my favorite show. And I think there's a place for that. I'm not saying that that's bad. I think there is a place for reflecting so we don't get re-triggered though. Because if you think about it, if we just escape that and something similar comes along and re-triggers us, well, our brain went to heighten anxiety before in our body. So chances are we're going to again, unless something changes. And that little bit of change doesn't have to be much. It could just be a reflection of, you did the best you could, or it wasn't as bad as I thought it was in the moment. And that could be part of observe, but that could just be kind of saying nice things to yourself, of little mantras of, you showed up today. Even if you didn't feel 100%, you did it. And I'm proud of you. It could be just a 5 to 10 minutes of reflecting. It doesn't have to be a whole hour of journaling or anything like that. I personally like to journal, or I like to speak it aloud in a voice memo, or just to myself or to a friend or to my husband, because I'm a verbal processor. I feel like I need to get it out, but you might be someone who can just think it. You might be someone who wants to write it and make it very confidential, and that's completely fine. You might be someone who wants to verbally process with someone safe, which could be a friend, a family member, your dog, yourself, a counselor. And those are all good and fine things too. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Let's see, what are some other good ones? Do you sell anxiety journals? So we have some really great resources. We have our self-talk journal that I wrote that is just coming out. We have that you can order online and the hard copy or digital, and it's all based on these principles. We have our self-love journal that's a bestseller that is really great on practicing a lot of self-compassion alongside of this. So they all target anxiety just in some different ways. They're really good. There's an online course too called Silencing Your Inner Critic that I teach on there as well. That again, this is where anxiety is really stemmed in, of these negative thought patterns. We call them automatic negative thoughts or inner critic in psychology, but that's usually those things, the wheel that perpetuates things like anxiety. So if you're someone that likes journals, that could be great, the self-talk or the self-love. If you're someone that likes doing it, someone teaching you, the online course is great. If you're someone who likes to watch YouTube videos or podcasts, these ones in our podcasts are great. So there's a lot of good resources out there. And even on Instagram, there's some really good, therapists that are posting things that are really bite-sized chunks on anxiety, but they're really practical. And I know TikTok and Facebook and Instagram, they do have some really good stuff out there. You want to be careful of what you're following, but if it's helping you, that's a good thing. Awesome. Yes. Oh, and I think we posted some of our journals. Thank you. This is awesome. Awesome. And yeah, if you subscribe, then you'll get to see the notifications of all of our podcasts and when they go live, and so you don't miss a video, and that would be really good. We have so many great topics. We talk about this a lot. So it's myself and a few other therapists that often, Haley and Joelle, who also teach on these types of topics, and anxiety is it's probably the big one. So you get a few different perspectives, which is really nice to hear from too. Yeah, Aaron says, thanks for your observation that anxiety is a sliding scale, not just on or off. This is huge to me because I remember when I was in university, and I remember talking to my counselor and just saying, I'm just a naturally anxious person. And she said, no, you're not. You're not created to be that way. And that's not on or off. It's more like a staircase. And I loved that. And I really like those analogies. So that's often why I say like the lamp, like the on or off, or the dimmer switch. And that's often what the goal is because our goal is not to get rid of anxiety completely. It does serve a little bit of a positive purpose in there too. Not always the 10, but it does a little bit. And so how can we change that dimmer switch a little bit? And then it gives you more empowerment and more control over, okay, even if I just go down one step of that staircase. And that's why I like that out of 10 too, of maybe I name it to tame it, of my anxieties right now a 9. And I practice some of the things that we talk about, even, a walk or breathing or art or music or exercise, plants, like just even looking at them or getting one for yourself. And my anxiety went down. And then you tell yourself, okay, what would I rate it right now? Oh, now it's a 7. And do you see how it went from a 9 to a 7? That's empowering. And that's based on choices that you've made. And then you come into a place of position and control and authority versus being overwhelmed by anxiety and being that victim mentality of it. So I love that. Thank you. I'm so glad that resonated with you because it really is a sliding scale. And I think that was a huge game changer to me. It really was. Okay, Michelle asks, what if you have exploded? Basic things to do, or it's too complicated? Well, I think, yeah. So when we explode, I give this analogy a lot. So in Western Canada, where I live, I kind of live in wine country. So think of wine barrels. And so we have a beautiful oak wine barrel, and it's full of red wine. And so if it's full of it, a little pebble comes along and it comes across and like hits the barrel, and it doesn't really make any noise. It doesn't really make an echo, or it's just like, you barely hear it. A big rock gets chucked at it and you might hear a thud, but all that red wine absorbs it. It's full. Now let's compare a more empty barrel, or a barrel that's, just a quarter full. It's really mostly empty, 3/4 empty. So a big rock comes alongside and boom, it hits it, and there's an echo. Boom, 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 boom. You hear an echo because it's not fully full. And a little pebble comes across, and you hear even a little bit of an echo there too, even on a small one. Boom, boom, because it's not full. And so every day we're making deposits into our barrels. If we're the barrel, our life is our barrel. And that's things that fill us up. That red wine is the things that fill us up. So we're making deposits of things like, okay, work's fulfilling. My relationships are fulfilling. I'm exercising. I'm learning something new, like a podcast or journaling. I'm enjoying that part of me. I'm, eating well, or I'm trying new things. There's all these things that are going well in my life. My barrel is full. But then there's also things that deplete and take out from our journal, or our barrel. Got journal on my mind. So our barrel, think of the tap, or if there's a hole at the bottom. And so it could be, oh, my health isn't as great as I want it to be. Oh, my body image. Oh, that coworker. Oh, the stress of my work, of not having work, of my studies, of being in my own head, of overthinking, of a relationship, of anything. And so slowly your barrel goes from being pretty full to a quarter or quite empty. And what that echo represents of a big rock that can be fired, that could be an illness, that could be a breakup, that could be a hard day. And what happens is you have an echo, boom, boom, boom. That's understandable because your barrel is not really empty, or not really full. It's more empty. So you're going to have a blow up. You're going to have an outburst. You're going to explode. You're going to have an emotional echo, is what I like to call it, because you're either going to cry. This could also look like shutting down. It could look like saying something mean, being irritated, short. That's a huge symptom of anxiety, is irritability, of exploding, that not knowing what to do, paralyzing, freezing. But that echo can also be caused by little stressors that maybe before didn't cause an echo, didn't cause a big reaction. You were able to handle it because your barrel was pretty full. But now when you're pretty empty, you're burnt out, you're spread thin, they cause echoes too. And that's concerning. So that's where you can try some of these strategies, like walking, social support, counseling, journaling, pouring into your mental health, pouring into that barrel of who you are to help it kind of come up a little bit, so those echoes don't reverberate so loud. And again, I think it's often, when we think about, oh, it's too complicated, I'm having a hard time to do basic things. That's often a big symptom of anxiety and depression. But it's, again, just starting small. Like some days it's just eating, showering, and sleeping, and doing your best to position yourself up well. It doesn't mean you have to have perfect sleeps, because often with anxiety, it's hard to shut off your brain. So if you're someone who maybe you can fall asleep, but you can't stay asleep, you wake up at odd hours, or you're going over things in your head a lot, get a little notebook by the side of your bed. And I don't like to use my phone because the blue light can kind of sometimes activate you, or your phone, you can get sidetracked or distracted. Just old-fashioned pen and paper, or little sticky note, little journal. Write out what's on your mind. And sometimes I give myself permission. Okay, I literally can't do anything about this until 8 a.m. tomorrow, the next morning. And I try to give myself a specific time that I'm going to do it. We call it a worry time in psychology, where we can say, okay, I'm really worried about this specific thing in my life. Like, oh, I blew up at work, or work's not going that well. I need some time to invest into it. And pick a day during your week and say, okay, I'm going to, at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, I'm going to listen to one of these podcasts, and I'm going to make some notes, and I'm going to journal and see where it takes me. That can be something where you make a worry time to say, okay, this is when I'm going to deal with it. So it's not coming around with you everywhere, interrupting your sleep, or coming into a classroom or a work meeting, or in relationships or hobbies that you like to do, because you can't really do anything about it in there anyway. So if you have a designated worry time, say, okay, this is when I'm going to deal with it, then it kind of calms you down a little bit, but you got to follow through. And this again takes ownership and builds accountability and a sense of accomplishment of doing what you say you're going to do. That's trust. Trust can be boiled down to saying, I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. And then you get to trust yourself more if you do that. And that's actually very empowering in how you can conquer anxiety too. So that worry time, designate a certain time of the day or the week where you can jot down all your worries or observe or just get them out of your brain or challenge them or have for counseling or a podcast or one of our journals or something like that, where you can go to and actually have some designated time to be intentional about, fill your barrel, so to speak. And that can be really good. So that in those moments of in the classroom or in the meeting or in that conversation with that difficult person, you can reassure yourself, okay, I'm going to deal with this at 6 p.m. Wednesday, or, already have an idea set out. That can be really good. Or even maybe it's not a set time, maybe it's a set activity. Like we talked about, like, okay, I know today I get to go for a walk. That will help. And just even that perspective, I get to go for a walk today. That will help. Takes 2 seconds, but wow, can that shift a perspective? Oh, Celeste, I'm glad you like the emotional echo, and the barrel. I love analogies. I'm such an analogy person. And that just resonated with me so much because I had those echoes. I felt explosive. I felt reactionary, or I had these big disproportionate responses or reactions. And I just thought, where are these coming from? And my counselor described something similar like that in a little bit different way. And that really resonated with me that, oh, I'm not crazy. Honestly, I'm flooded and maybe my barrel's kind of empty and I got to do some practical stuff to fill it back up. I got to spend some time with friends and exercise or journaling or rest or counseling. And it slowly, started to fill back up. And those big stressors and those little pebbles, those little stressors came along and I didn't have those big emotional echoes anymore. And that is the most encouraging thing when you go through something hard and you recognize how you used to respond or how it would have been a blow up or short or irritable or just crying or whatever that response could be. And you don't. Then you're like, okay, that stuff does help. Hey, it does work. And it's probably not one thing. It's probably a combination of a lot of little things. And so whatever resonates with you today, from stop or the scale that I talked about, or the barrel analogy, or whatever we talked about, like it could be from the journals or the silencing your inner critic online course. It could be from walking or being in nature or plants or music or aromatherapy. It could be therapy. Just seeing that you're not alone in this. I want to encourage you in that, because often with anxiety, again, we feel like something's wrong with us or that we're alone in feeling this way, but it's a common human experience. And the goal is not to get it down from 10 all the way down to 0. That no pressure, take that off yourself. It's the staircase of coming down just by 1. And that's doing something powerful, just coming down the stairs. And so I want to encourage you in that too. Oh, good. Does anyone have any questions on stop or anything we talked about? I'm just going to open it up to everybody now. Oh, I'm glad Nilda says that she got our self-love journal and loves it. Oh, so glad. They're really helpful. Sometimes you just need a blank piece of paper to unload onto, but sometimes it's really nice to have some guided prompts that you could learn something, but also ask you some of those questions to reflect on. Again, we talked about reflecting today, of not just going and zoning out with Netflix or going on autopilot, but actually reflecting. That could be something to say, well, I know I have a journal, and it could be ours. It could be another one that you found, but oh, I'm going to process through that. And that can be really empowering too. Michelle has a question. Observe, you said anxiety usually goes to feeling and then something about thoughts. Oh, feeling. So that's a cognitive behavioral therapy perspective of it. So CBT is kind of the gold standard of treatment for anxiety, stress, depression, negative thinking. But really what CBT says is that our thoughts, so our self-talk, our feelings, so feeling overwhelmed, stressed, fearful, nervous, anxious, and our behaviors, the things that we do or we don't do. So avoiding something that causes anxiety, or zoning out to Netflix, or eating, all those things are interconnected. So if we can get to that wheel, so think of that wheel of our thoughts and put that spoke in it, that stick, to stop it, and we use that stop technique, it can interrupt or change our thought patterns, which will change how we feel, which will change what we do too. So small changes in any one of those will influence the other one. So CBT, if you want to read a little bit more on that, that's really such a great perspective on anxiety. And again, none of us therapists are necessarily purists out there. I think we need to use a lot of different therapeutic models and approaches for it. There's a lot of evidence for different ones. But those CBT practices are really powerful and practical. Yeah, Erin says, no question, just thanking you for the info. Great presentation. Oh, thanks, Erin. That's awesome. We loved having all of you on today. And again, I hope you leave feeling encouraged that anxiety, nothing's wrong with you. This is a common and quite normal at times human experience, but to gently face that fear, not avoid it, because when we avoid it, that anxiety monster grows. And so I hope something of this talk today resonated with you, of what others have shared, what they try, maybe that stop technique or anything else of your personalized questions that we got to teach on, which is so fun. Tish, my anxiety tends to come from worrying about health issues. Some I have and some I don't. Totally. We've seen a spike of health anxiety in the last 2 years. If you're in Canada, I love Anxiety Canada, health anxiety. And even if you're in Australia or the States, you can Google that and find it. But really any ADAA is a big resource in the United States. It's for anxiety and depression. And so on those big resources are all on health anxiety lately. And it's pretty similar. It's a little bit unique, and it's unique to every person. But health anxiety is becoming more prevalent, obviously coming through a pandemic. And so I would go to those resources, or even Psychology Today, health anxiety, because number one, you're going to see you're not alone, you're not crazy, but then you're going to see some other techniques too, specific to health anxiety. But again, stop is really good for it too, is stopping what you're doing, like just kind of pull back. Take a breath, connect with your body, because with health anxiety in particular, we really need to connect our brain and our body because it's going on in both. And then observe, like write down those things of what's actually going on physically in your body, in your brain, and go from there. But that's going to be huge. Julie, how can you support a person who struggles with anxiety? Oh, I think we should do a talk just on that, like supporting someone going through anxiety. But the best thing that you can do is show up whole for them. Show up with a full barrel. Like if you want that for them, you've got to be authentic and living that out. You can even get counseling like with them. You, again, back to Psychology Today or adaa.org or Anxiety Canada if you're in Canada, or really those are international resources you can use. But how to support someone with health anxiety or with anxiety in general, not health anxiety. There's so many great resources out there. Just for sake of time, I can't go too much into that. That's something we could literally do a whole live on, which would be such a great topic. Yes. How do you do that when you're in the presence of a difficult person? Celeste asks, how can this be done in a covert manner? So this, again, stop is something that you can do that nobody knows that you're actually doing. Those are things that you can excuse yourself for a bathroom break and go onto your phone and write down those things in the notes section of your phone. If you don't have your journal, that's okay. But the reflecting part here is really good. If you're in the presence of a difficult person, I'd encourage you to go back and listen to our live on boundaries, because your boundary's been crossed in some way. And we want to honor that and really validate that. That's number one, where anxiety is coming from. So identifying some boundary crossings is gonna get to the root of that. And then again, you can use stop. I would remove yourself if you can, but you're not always going to be able to, which again add the worry time of, okay, I can't get away from them for right now. I'm just going to take some deep breaths. I'm going to have my water, like refocus onto something of the things in the room that are red or whatever. Take a deep breath, even covertly. Like you don't have to connect with, put your hand on, you don't have to take big deep breaths, but you can just do, or push your feet into the floor. There's little covert things like that you can do. Absolutely. And I know that sometimes you can't always get away, but again, reassuring the brain and yourself, hey, at tonight, I'm going to get to go for a walk, or I can call this person. Like already start thinking in your mind what you can do. Or after this talk, I would suggest write down some of these things that resonated so that you don't have to think of it in the moment when you're already flooded, that you already have a list to go to say, okay, this is how I can cope. That's going to be the best thing. Yes, so healing. Good. Thank you. Check into those suggestions. Definitely. Awesome. So Celeste, again, in those cases, how do I avoid being drained by them? Listen to our boundaries talk. That might be just so encouraging for you. I think that would be really, really good because that's definitely a boundaries issue here that's going to spike anxiety. How do we go back to other live sessions? So I think, and correct me, feel free, anybody to jump in if I'm wrong, but just on our YouTube channel, like Therapy Talks by Switch Research. So we have a podcast too. So there's so many different podcasts that are on YouTube, as well as our lives that you can go back and look at the chats, but also watch live or listen to. And so you can see the topics on there. Great. And somebody put the link handily in there. So that could be really, really good too. And it's okay if it takes like a few times of listening to things, or it spurs a different, boundaries and anxiety often do go hand in hand, because when a boundary is crossed, then an internal value of yours, something's rubbing against it. And then that usually happens of, hey, anxiety is going to happen because a value is not being adhered to. I'm not feeling heard. I'm feeling kind of trapped, even just metaphorically. And so boundaries is a huge one. I love working in boundaries and anxiety because they often do go so hand in hand. Awesome. So you guys can see all those lives and podcasts there. And I just want to thank you all for coming on today and sharing and interacting. Thank you, Michelle, and everybody so much for coming on today. And yeah, it's so neat to see people from the US and specific places like Wisconsin in the US to Australia, to Canada, to British Columbia, and literally all over. So be encouraged that everyone does experience anxiety, and there are proven techniques that can help you personally cope with it and get over it and just stop it. So I hope something resonated with you today. Practice, lean into one thing. You don't have to take all of what we talked about, but write down some things that resonated, keep them handy so you can go back to them, and just practice one this week. All right. Thank you, everyone.